Facebook and I see a TED talk from Stephen Bartlett, and I reached out to him and just said, I'm a big believer that young people should gain digital leverage. And what I mean by that is, if you are not paying attention, you will be left behind. This is the single greatest opportunity of any of our lifetimes. The one thing I would do if I was a young person is...
Hello everyone, and welcome to The Hidden Blueprint by Pragmat, a podcast for aspiring entrepreneurs and business leaders where we uncovered the blueprint behind some of the world's best. Today we're incredibly excited to welcome Oliver Yonchev, the co-founder at Flight Story, a company that he co-founded alongside Stephen Bartlett after sending him a message on Facebook. If you're an aspiring entrepreneur, then this is a must-watch, as Oliver shares his insights into his journey and what he would do to take advantage of the revolutionary force of artificial intelligence to succeed over the coming years. This is the blueprint of Oliver Yonchev. Oliver, you've been at the forefront of digital marketing and technology for over a decade now. You became managing director of Social Chain at just 26 and co-founded Flight Story after that alongside Stephen Bartlett, who I'm sure many of our audience will already know. Could you take us back to the beginning and what sort of first sparked your interest in entrepreneurship and marketing?
A question like that, you made me sound old. I still have the self-image of feeling very young. So I'll take you through a little bit of my entrepreneurial journey. It isn't the classic archetype of an entrepreneur. I didn't drop out of college or university. I went into a stable career. I've been through corporate worlds. But I've always had an ambition to want to start something on my own. And that's been a thread. So I started my career as a musician. I used to be a drummer. That came to an abrupt end, so I'm a failed indie rocker. At the end of that process, I had to figure out what I wanted to do. And I always feel when you're growing up, there's this immense pressure to make these very consequential decisions in your life. Which, in hindsight, some of them are, some of them aren't. But I was faced with a choice and I went to what I knew. So I studied music at university. I did that for 3 years and I was quite fortunate to join a course or a set of modules that didn't just do music, but they did promotion and marketing. I started to learn that there was a career path for me that allowed me that A, I found fulfilling, and B, would be a valuable skill in the world. And that was the kind of foundation. What do I enjoy versus what can create value? My very naive premise was that in a world where we have more choices, being able to stand out, learn how to market yourself, learn how to market your businesses, that would be a valuable skill over time. So that's kind of where I spent my career. I joined a media owner on a graduate program, and during that period, I was there for about 5 years. And during that period, I decided that I wanted to set up my own business. So and some people may relate to this, I was a person that used to just buy domains. So I would have an idea, I would think of the name and the brand, I'd go buy the domain, and I had this, what is today just this giant graveyard of ideas that never lived. And funnily enough, the first idea that gained some traction for me was a really rubbish one. It was selling light bulbs online. And I did that as a side hustle just to learn A, how to build a website, B, how to sell things online, C, how to ship a product that potentially had a high margin. And I tried to learn some skills, and that wasn't a successful venture. And then one day I'm on Facebook, less popular if you're young, but I was on Facebook and I see a TED talk from Stephen Bartlett. And his TED talk, the basic premise was how he built his business knowing very little about business. I was at a time when I was thinking a lot about what I wanted to do. I started to have this entrepreneurial itch, and I reached out to him and just said, inspiring journey, keep it up, my man. It was just I had no intent of anything. He reached back out and said, do you want to come meet us? We're doing some interesting things. Then I joined Social Chain, which was Relatively early stage. The company had been trading for about a year and a half, but it was getting a lot of attention. It was an adjacent field to what I was working in. I was in media. This was a social first advertising company. And then I spent 5 years there building that with Stephen. It took me to the US. I built out the US entity and ran the US business. So I was very privileged to go work in New York for several years. That taught me a lot. I was exposed to a lot through that process. And then Stephen exited the company. I followed maybe 10 months later, and we started something new together called Flight Story. And that journey was about 3 years for me. And just a month ago, I exited that business and sold my stake in the business. And here we are. I'm now in the process of setting up a few different things.
So I always find it quite fascinating to sort of learn the sort of initial journeys that people take and the sort of windy paths that you get. I did want to touch a little bit upon the learnings that you mentioned and the thing that sort of stood out to you in Stephen Bartlett's TED Talk of starting a business without necessarily knowing too much. Again, you mentioned you started with the light bulb business and we're learning about shipping products, etc., etc. What would you say that experience, maybe other sort of early experiences working on small projects that maybe necessarily didn't take off and weren't the sort of big idea that you had, but how would you say those experiences shaped the learnings that then gave you, the strength and the capabilities to be successful with your future ventures?
Yeah, you may have heard the phrase, there are no losses, only lessons. So you either win or you lose, right? I think one of the characteristics that entrepreneurs develop is resilience and an appetite for taking losses. Because for you to be successful at anything, you have had to have tried. And loss is awful. When you fail at something, it's not nice. And that's usually the biggest barrier for anyone starting anything. The fear of judgment, the fear of loss, the fear of being embarrassed, all of those things that they stop you trying things that you want to try. Great entrepreneurs are the type of people that run through walls, they take losses, and they have the humility then to listen and learn. So they're usually, I tend to find great entrepreneurs are very reflective. They're not romantic about them being right. They're just trying to get to the right answer, which is usually a reiterative process through experiences. And if I speak about my own journey and I reflect, I had no idea that me starting my career as a musician, and previously to that, I did a lot of sports. I had no idea that I would kind of steal a piece of those experiences and they would aid me and complement me. For example, when I did sport, I played at a high football, that's an academy level, up to about 16. You learn to take losses, you learn to be competitive, you learn to play with others. You get the initial ambition and the drive, you get humility, you get a lot of soft skills that are very valuable. When I applied those to being a musician, I was probably a little more driven than the classic musician, that you could argue is a little more laid back. So suddenly then I explore more creative arts and having drive, combining that with creative skills, then going into the corporate world of media sales, that gave me a lot of advantages. I think creativity is a superpower. I think what you can learn from sport and extracurricular activities will often define you, and you learn more from those things than formal experiences. So, every kind of juncture of my career or professional endeavors, I've kind of learnt something new and added to my toolkit. Because when you're young, you mentioned there you were describing something about not knowing too much. That's where you started this question. And I have a phrase that I've coined the curse of knowledge. And the beautiful thing about being young is you are naive. You don't know better. You have, if you fail, there's less consequences usually. Obviously, everyone's circumstance is different. As you get older, there are more risks. You become more stubborn. You think you know it all. You know too much. And the reality is, building a startup or building a company is very difficult. It's an audacious ask. I'm saying to you, I'm going to create value out of nothing. and I'm going to have less resources than everyone else. It's going to be competitive if you're doing anything in any field, and I'm going to go on to win. Despite all the data tells me most startups are going to fail. Most startups are almost inevitably going to fail over a 5 to 10 year window. Yeah, I'm going to do it anyway and give my all and put everything into this thing. And if you did that when you're older, you might go, you know what, it's not worth it for me. When you're young, you tend not to have those inhibitions. You don't know too much, and that naivety is a huge advantage. And if I just add one thing to that, if I think of where we are headed in the world, I'm a big believer that young people should gain digital leverage. And what I mean by that is doing what you're doing now, having conversations with people, creating content, learning skills that you're going to carry with you through different phases of your life. Digital leverage can also mean having the curiosity to go learn a new AI tool that is going to be incredibly useful in an organization. And I guarantee you, a lot of the incumbents, a lot of the people that are further down their careers, they are not going to make the effort to go read the manual. They're not going to go experiment and play. Sometimes that's circumstances, but more often than that, it's appetite. People get jaded over time. So I'm a big believer that there are huge advantages to being young, being naive. You've just got to recognize them and try a lot of things. People tell you like focus. I think when you're young, try everything. Figure out what you're good at. You're in discovery. Figure out what you like, what you're good at. I had no idea that I would A, like marketing, and B, be good at it. That I didn't know, but through some fortune, some decisions, a combination of a hell of a lot of hard work, I got to a place where more and more opportunities presented themselves.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can only really know whether you're going to not like something once you've actually done it. And the same thing with a startup. You never know if it's going to fail or if it's going to succeed until you actually try and implement it. I feel, though, that still today, with especially people my age, sort of younger people in their teenagers, early 20s, there is definitely a fear of failure. And I think you touched upon it. There's a fear of being looked down upon. What would you
Mm.
say to young people who maybe are experiencing a little bit of that? They're feeling like, I do want to be an entrepreneur, I do want to create, I do want to do all of this and learn new skills, but I'm just afraid of being looked down upon.
Toughen up. Honestly, the reality is if you want to, your actions have to meet your ambition. If you want to go build a company, I promise you it's one of the most difficult things you will ever do. It's not for everybody, really not. I think we've got accustomed to glamorizing entrepreneurship. Very difficult. People pursue entrepreneurship because they believe it gives them freedom. It's quite the opposite. When you start a company, you work for everyone else, your clients, your team, your investors, whoever that may be. Freedom is the farthest thing you have. You have no rest, you're attached to this thing. Generally speaking, this thing will succeed or fail based on the decisions that you make and the actions that you take, whether that's hiring the right people or making the right strategic decisions. So, entrepreneurship isn't for everyone. But to your point, where you started this, you should try. Figure out there's an idea that I think in your 20s, as you go through your 20s, you probably should try as many things as possible. And I don't just mean professionally. I mean a lot of experiences, friendships, relationships. You should experience as much as you can. And then I think as you enter your 30s, you're in a much better place to make informed decisions. You've kind of settled on who you are. You're not trying to please the world around you. You've gained more confidence in your self identity. You've taken many losses, so you have a thicker skin for that. You're more willing. And I think you're better placed. But honestly, the best bit of advice I can say for young people that feel tough, life is tough, right? Like you got to toughen up if you want to do audacious things. However, I will say my career trajectory wasn't one, I didn't start really entrepreneurship until, really into my sort of. So you kind of look at that and go, I've spent a decade learning skills and knowledge and expertise, and I did that initially for 5 years in a structured corporate environment. And I learned many skills, and that gave me so many advantages in direction and orientation. There isn't just one path. You hear these stories about the, college or university dropout that goes on to build the billion-dollar company. That is in 99.9% of cases never going to happen. We don't need to glamorize that zero to hero story. There are many paths you can take. And for many people, myself included, pursuing some structure and getting trained and having the guidance of great mentors in larger organizations, that was a wonderful value add for me, particularly when I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I think to your point about the glorification of entrepreneurship, everyone sees these entrepreneurs, millionaires on yachts, having a good time, sipping champagne. But in reality, as you mentioned, everything falls upon you. When it's your business, you've grown it from nothing to what it is now. You've got responsibilities. It's not like a large organization where you can pass on blame and things fall to someone else and the higher ups. It's on you. So to that point, I wanted to speak a little bit about pressure and what you would say maybe someone who's thinking about launching their own businesses about managing pressure and managing the responsibilities that does come with entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and pressure is very subjective, by the way. Meaning you could objectively look at my life and my schedule and go, wow, that seems a lot. For me, I've been conditioned over time, to get comfortable with a certain amount of chaos and a higher level of pressure through different experiences. What I'd say is my coping mechanisms have largely been anchored to trying to find harmony. And what I mean by harmony is harmony across all facets of being the human experience. For example, if you give everything to your business and something goes wrong, but you have nothing else, you haven't invested any time in your friendships, you're not learning new things, you've not explored relationships, when something goes wrong in your business, your world implodes. That's everything. You have to have passions outside. So throughout my career, and whether that's in professional endeavors, in corporations or building companies, I've always tried to create a level of harmony. I am a workaholic, so don't get it twisted that I'm not like working very, very hard all the time. But alongside that, I try and find space for good sleep. I've invested in my friendships, I've invested in my relationships. I love sports, so I find time to do those things. And because I have other things I'm passionate about, when I'm having a terrible day and my world is imploding at work and everything's going wrong, you tend to have a bit more harmony and balance. And you certainly have the right constitution and coping mechanisms because you've got other things you care about. I would say that's something you have to work at over time. And if you are on that journey of setting up a business or doing something independently, you're going to face difficult times and you'll be very thankful if you have invested in other areas of your life, whether it's passion, relationships, those types of things.
Although one of the biggest talking points I think at the moment is university educations. I mean, a lot of young people, they see the college dropouts, they see the Zuckerbergs, they see the Elon Musks, and they dropped out of college, they built their billion-dollar business, what have you. Some people are seeing those who didn't go to university altogether. What are your thoughts on university when it comes to young people, aspiring entrepreneurs or not?
I think university or further education is a wonderful thing. Learning is something you should be a lifelong learner. The minute you stop learning, I think that's you should call it quits. Like one of the most fulfilling things in life is learning new things, reading new things, consuming, watching. To be skilled today, you have to consume a lot. In any format, but you have to consume a lot. You have to keep building on your knowledge base. What do I think about university as an institution? I think in the UK particularly, we've created a system where it's a default position when a lot of people don't fully know what they want to do. And I don't think that should be the case. But I'm not one of these people that will say the university system is broken because people, sometimes you need structure to go move to a different city and gain some of that independence and break out of your hometown circle and have new friends and new experiences. And what university does is it creates that artificially in a structured way. And many will argue you don't need any of those things to go move to another city and leave your friends. I would disagree. I think you kind of do. Yes, technically you don't have to, but fundamentally you kind of need a real reason to just go to a random city in another part of the country and meet new people and put yourself in those circumstances. So I'm not anti-university, but I also believe today is the most wonderful time to be alive as a young person in the sense of you have humanity's knowledge on your phones. You can see people like you that have walked a different path that hasn't just been the traditional archetype of going to university, getting a career. And if that appeals to you, that's a wonderful thing. So, yeah, I'm not anti university. There are undoubtedly flaws in the system. And will you garner all the skills required to be effective in the workplace or starting a business at university? God, no, you won't. You won't learn all the skills, you'll learn some skills. So it's a trade off, right? I think people can make those conscious decisions. And depending on your path, a lot of larger institutions still gatekeep access to professional endeavours and opportunities through the lens of university. So if you want to be a lawyer at a large corporate law firm, you probably should go to university. In fact, you almost certainly have to. If you want to go get an internship at Goldman Sachs, you better have gone to university, right? So it depends on what you want.
Yeah, that's definitely some valuable information. I mean, I love the point about having the availability of information that as young people we do. Everything's on our phones. If we don't understand something, whack it into ChatGPT and we get an answer through there as well. The availability of learning is infinite for us, which is a blessing and I think also a curse at the same time that for some people they see the stories of these successful people who, self-taught, AI experts, etc., and they see these people who've taught all themselves how to do these amazing things and have gone and launched their own business. But when it comes to you potentially getting permission from parents or getting like sort of societal permission from friends, if you will, that maybe is a whole different struggle. What would you say to maybe someone out there who's ambitious, they want to start learning something outside of a traditional university degree if they think it might not necessarily benefit them as much? What would you say to them if they're feeling the sort of pressure maybe of parents of you should go to university because everyone does?
Hmm? Yeah, it's difficult, right? I have a lot of empathy for young people today. On one hand, there's an abundance of amazing tools and systems and access that I didn't have growing up, and I grew up in a town called Barnsley, old working class town. The height of the aspiration of my friends were like, I want to be a bricklayer, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with being a bricklayer. But when you're young and naive and you shouldn't that shouldn't be the height of your aspiration. You should be a little more delusional in what you believe, right? You've got no reason not to, but I would say there are a lot of towns in the United Kingdom that are low aspiration. I came from one of those towns, right? So I recognize that today now you have role models and you can see people that are doing amazing things, but there's polarity to that. That adds an immense amount of pressure. Your self-worth gets called into question when you're not doing what you think you're supposed to be doing, right? I'm not as successful. You're constantly comparing yourself to the 1% of beauty, talent, knowledge, wealth. These are not healthy mechanisms for anyone, never mind a young mind that's in development. I'll start from a position of I have a ton of empathy. What do I think you should do is I think you need to build a muscle over time, and I use the muscle idea figuratively, but you need to build a muscle for not allowing the opinions of others to define who you are and what you want to be. And that's easier said than done. And a real practical step that you can take is if people aren't contributing in your life, and I mean this digitally, right? If someone makes you feel bad because they're showing off online and they're showing their wealth, remove them from your feed. Don't engage with their content. I'm a big believer today you have to curate a digital diet that serves you. In the same way you create a healthy diet so you're the best healthy version of yourself, we have to do the same with our inputs, the things we consume. So I'm a big believer in only following people that add value to your life. That can be knowledge, that can be inspiration. And if someone makes you feel bad, just cut them out. That's the great thing. You've got an unfollow button, right? And that's the biggest influence on your life. And soon, over time, you'll develop a conditioning to mean that you can now have the confidence to say no and take some risks and or walk a path that maybe those around you haven't.
It's definitely a very valuable lesson for our young audience to sort of draw from. And you mentioned about being delusionally ambitious, which I wanted to go into a little bit more. I think it draws perfectly well on your point earlier about how when you're young, the consequences for your actions are slightly less, again, not in all cases, but tend to be slightly less, which gives you that ability to go and try things. And I think the irrationality of launching a startup, you look at the statistics, it is irrational to launch a startup, and everyone thinks they're different. There's an emotionality that comes with that. Speaking purely from your journey, how would you say the sort of delusional ambition has really sort of supported you and powered you to where you are today?
It's been, I have described myself in the past as delusional. I say it as a little facetiously, but growing up, I had a lot of self belief. And do I put that down to parents that instilled confidence in me? I was very blessed to have great parents that I believe did encourage me to have confidence. Is it neurological? Were I genetically born with just optimism? Maybe, right? A combination of both. Not everyone has those advantages. But what I will say over time is you build up a catalogue of evidence. So early on in your career, you have to have optimism and delusion because you don't have a body of evidence that's reaffirming that you can go achieve that thing. When I was doing music, I went through that process and we got a record deal, and that was positive affirmation that you could be successful at this craft. When I got on a graduate program later, that was positive affirmation that I'm capable and I deserve a seat in a corporation. When I joined a company and then drove that company and that company grew and was successful, you gain experiences through that drive more evidence that you're capable. And then you start to close this gap between what starts as probably optimism and delusion and actually now is a reality. So I think over time, you work your way through those phases. So yeah, that was my experience. And it's very hard for me to say go be delusionally ambitious or go be like optimistic. Because if I put a gun to your head and said, like, be happy, believe something you don't, it's very hard to say. So I'm aware that it's a nuanced topic and not everyone has what I describe as mindset privilege. This idea you have the mind that believes you can. Are there things you can do to learn? Yes. Seek out knowledge. Create healthy systems in your life. Listen to people that you admire that give you inspiration and don't steal from you. And when I say steal, steal energy, you know, steal kind of your bandwidth, your emotional bandwidth. Yeah, I think you can build up more confidence over time if it isn't your natural disposition.
I wanted to touch on that last point you made about your emotional bandwidth and effectively what you accept in terms of time with people and how if they're adding value to your life, you obviously keep them in your life, and if they're not adding value to your life, you cut them out. It's the same with the feed question. We hear a lot about how you're the average of the five people you spend your most time with. How important would you say it is for young people, especially in this world with social media where everyone's posting about how great their life is every 2 minutes and everyone always seems to be doing something more exciting than you are? How important would you say it is for young people to be aware of that exact point that I need to surround myself with people who are going to add value and remove anything, whether it's people, whether it's a certain activity that's going to drain and sap energy from me that isn't giving me any value in return?
Yeah, I, I'll play something back to you, right? And I'll speak from a place of being a man. There's a data point that looks at friendships over time. And when you're young, you have the optimal amount of friends. And they're usually circumstantial. Who do you live next to when you're growing up, right? Who am I in the same class as? But over time, you tend not to invest in your friendships and you tend to make friends through work endeavors, by proximity. So you've gone through your entire life not being intentional around the friends that you choose. So you're less likely to have shared interests. It's kind of more circumstantial. And when you look at the data, it's horrific to find that men, particularly, when asked by the time you're 40, how many friends could you rely on in a crisis event? The data says 0.6, meaning the average man has less than one friend that they could rely on in a crisis. And that speaks to a broader problem around men not investing in their relationships. It's a problem for women too, but less so. Women are much better at nurturing their friendships and investing in, you only have to look at their group chats. They're very different to like the boy group chats. So my general thesis around friendships is try and treat them like you do dating. You probably have a criteria for dating, which is these are the qualities I admire in someone, and you'll make some compromises, but there are some things you won't compromise. Why don't we do that with friends? Why don't we say, I'd like my friends to like share these interests or be curious about learning or want to understand about financial literacy and investing. Imagine if you put as much intention to building friendships as you did romantic relationships. I think you would go through life in a much more fulfilled way. And I'm very blessed. I have like a different friends in different circumstances, but I have a core group of about 6 friends. We talk every day, we share ideas. It's our most trusted confidence. It's a safe space. And those people, we live around the world now. We all meet up every year. We have, amazing friendships, but we invest. We made a conscious decision that we would invest in each other. And they all run businesses, my friends. They're all entrepreneurial, and I want to be around that energy.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty about surrounding yourself with people like that, when you do have the courage to cut out maybe people who have been in your life a long time, but are now starting to sap your energy and they're not really providing much value. I wanted to speak a little bit about an individual who you did surround yourself with, who I'm sure added an immense amount of value to your life, Stephen Bartlett. We spoke a little bit at the beginning about how you reached out to him via Facebook, which ultimately led to the founding of Flight Story together. That is an incredibly audacious move, if you will, reaching out to someone via social media. At the sounds of it, it doesn't even sound very audacious, just sending someone a message on a publicly available platform. I wanted to ask you, though, two young entrepreneurs who maybe see that as quite a daunting sort of thing, sending someone a message on a LinkedIn, on a Facebook, whatever social media platform it is, about the importance of being brave and taking that leap when it comes to networking and building their professional sort of mentors that could support them with any ambitions that they have.
Yeah, I was lucky in the sense that when I messaged Steve, I genuinely had no intent and I'd never done it before. It was a truly serendipitous act where I just took inspiration from his journey and just said, you know what, congrats, inspiring stuff. That was it. It transpired that we shared a lot of the same interests. Together, we could create a lot of value through the last business and then, more recently, Flight. And he's one of my best friends now as a consequence of that. So we've shared a lot together. I reflect, I'm not a person that does what you're describing. That was an anomaly for me. That wasn't a normal act. But as we talk through this, I go, you know what? You should ask. And the main reason people don't is just that fear of rejection. We've talked about it a lot in this conversation, but it's very hard to take a no or someone to ignore you. The reality is, most people are going to ignore you. And it's not because it's you, it's just because life is busy. I try and make a really conscious effort to respond to as many people as I can. But every day I may have 50 messages in my inbox on LinkedIn. I might have 150 emails to respond to. I've got commitments, life, family. So sometimes I ignore people that are very worthy of my time. but you only have a finite amount. And I think as you progress through your career, you have to get more comfortable with saying no. At the start of your career, get very comfortable with saying yes. I think that's the distinction I'll make. Say yes to everything, experience everything. As you progress through, learn to say no.
I mean, for young people, being able to learn from those around you who have been successful, they've made the mistakes that every entrepreneur and every successful business person and every person makes just going through life, whether that be in a corporate or more personal sort of environment. How important would you say it is for young entrepreneurs to find these type of people, maybe people who are, that they've done it, they've achieved the peak of an entrepreneur's dream, they've exited their business, and even just people maybe a year, 2 years ahead of them in their journey to learn from their mistakes so that they can try and sort of navigate their own path without making the same mistakes that their sort of mentor or newfound friend does or did, sorry.
Yeah, I think mentorship's a really interesting area because it's, on one hand, you'd be vastly surprised how many successful people want to give back. They will give you time, energy, they've walked a path you want to walk, and knowledge is everything. So you being able to distill that knowledge is a wonderful thing. However, I think it's a very narrow description of mentors. We tend to think of people that have the most influence on our lives are people that we've met and spent a lot of time with. The reality is you don't need to. The best mentors in your life could be just a really good book that you've garnered a lot of value from. The best mentors could be people you never meet, but you just enjoy their content and you consume and you get value from the conversations that they're having. You don't need mentors to be very specific, but it is also a wonderful thing that people are willing to give you their time and pass and give back to a path that they've walked. So I'm not anti-mentor, but I'm also like, I'm comfortable saying you don't actually need a mentor.
It's really interesting. I haven't actually necessarily had anyone put it to me like that before, that something such as a book, a video could in a way do the same thing as a mentor. And you're absolutely right. Like, the availability of people's stories online nowadays make it so easy just to learn from anyone without even ever meeting them. Is there anyone in particular that stands out for you who maybe you haven't met personally, but, or even a book, for example, but has had a very significant impact on you and your professional journey?
Yeah, so look, there's been many books I could cite, many, some of them for different things. There's great books, Ray Dalio Principles. I garnered a lot from that. There's a book called The War of Art that got me over this kind of resistance. It was a book for writers by Stephen Presswich or Pressfield. It's an idea of not procrastinating. Very short book. Helped me be hyper effective in what I do. I've garnered a lot from different types of fields, fiction, observations of the world, podcasts. I've been a fan. I got so much from podcasts, just being a fly on the wall to amazing conversations. Go back. I was listening to Joe Rogan 10 years ago. I used to drive a lot. I had 4 hours of commuting a day when I was driving into work. So I was 4 hours in a car. I used to keep sane by listening to podcasts. So these wonderful long form conversations have really aided me. So, there are so many people I've taken value from, and then all for different reasons, different reasons, specific reasons. But yeah, I've never actually had a formal mentor. I've just had a lot of people that have either shared knowledge with me along the way, helped me out, provided opportunities, being kind in their time. I've had those types of things in abundance.
However, you've been very vocal about the potential of Web3 and artificial intelligence. I wanted to ask, for young people more generally, how vital is it for them to start building up their understanding and trying to leverage these, really innovative technologies that are going to reshape the world whether we like it or not?
Yeah. Zoom out for a second. So, if you think of the world today, the world economy is that there are largely two big costs. There's one which is energy. What is the cost to produce and move things? And the other cost is human ingenuity. Everything that's created, every idea. Intelligence. What artificial intelligence is pioneering is it's reducing the cost burden of one of those things, meaning intelligence. And if you factor that in, a lot of things change. This is in the same way the Industrial Revolution, electricity transformed manufacturing, and you had modern society built around that. The internet digitized the world in a new way, and you had new business models emerge, new ways to create economic value. And if you understood code 20 years ago, you spoke a language that very few did. Now, social media then acted as really an accelerator. It gave power to individuals to have a voice in a way that meant, it wasn't gatekept by incumbents and publishers and medias. Individuals could rise and capture huge amounts of attention. And now you go a step further and go, artificial intelligence is doing it with human ingenuity. I go, if you are not paying attention, you will be left behind. This is the single greatest opportunity of any of our lifetimes. You will hear negative stories about AI because there are risks with any profound innovation or technology, and you will hear many positive stories. The reality is the technology is neither good nor bad, but it's incredibly transformative. And I'm certainly not a computer scientist, or I've not been in the field of AI for a long time, but I've taken a professional interest for several years now, and I've had the good fortune of sort of sitting down and working with some leading authorities in the space. And the more I learn, the more I just say, the one thing I would do if I was a young person is be involved in AI. And being involved does not mean going and studying computer science. If you want to learn about the technical aspects of AI, there are many courses online that are free, from IBM to Google to Harvard. You can go learn the technical aspects if you choose to. But that isn't a precursor. That doesn't mean AI. It may mean developing skills and working in the industry. There are many startups operating the space, being around in those rooms. You don't have to get a formal education. It can mean just becoming experts on the tools that are becoming readily available to us. And one area and one field I'm particularly interested in is agents and agentic processes. And this is effectively, if you think of any organization right now, a company is different people with different skills working together to get different outcomes. That's what a company is. It's people working together with different skills. Right now, how we use an interface with AI is we'll use a tool and we do one-shot prompting. We ask a question or we ask for an outcome. That's not fundamentally how intelligence works. If I asked you today to write an essay, you wouldn't just write it in one sequence and through. You'd stop, you'd reiterate, you'd maybe do some more research, you'd validate an idea, you'd go have another conversation. And what AI agents can do is AI talking to other AI tools, infinite amount of AI tools to create an outcome. So again, you can start to think how we can augment AI, which today are very good at narrow tasks. I can use a tool that is great at transcribing. I can use another tool that is great at voice synthesis. I can use another tool that is great at generating images. And suddenly, if you start to think all these narrow tasks, like a company, like a team of people, could work together, that becomes a fascinating space. So I'm a big believer, learn about automations, go explore Make, go explore Zapier, start to play around and figure out how can this augment my life. And in turn, I think you'll develop some skills that could become very useful in any career path.
The thought of being left behind, I'm sure, and is certainly for many young people, one of the scary aspects of AI. again, you've got to get on with it, you've got to deal with it, and the only way to deal with that is to learn about it and to become one of those who actually can utilize it and create value on top of it. How would you recommend a young person to first start? Like they know they want to get involved with AI, but they don't have a clue where to start. What would you say to someone like that?
Like if you were starting any journey, learn, curate, find people that have walked a path that you're interested in. Create your feed. Go onto X and follow professionals in the space. Go onto LinkedIn and start to engage and ask questions to people that have authority and understand the sector. And over time, through consumption, you'll gain more knowledge. People will say things and share ideas that you can connect with. And then alongside that, there is no substitute for experimentation. The wonderful thing about all these products is pretty much all of them have a freemium version, which is quite unheard of. You can go access the most advanced technology humanity has ever created or seen for free. Put that into context. It's wild. You can access those things for free. So I think if you take agency, experiment, play, test, do all of those things, combine that with following, consuming newsletters, videos, curating your feeds of these types of people, that is a very good starting place for you. And then when you layer in another passion, like you may be passionate, you may be taking a law degree. Imagine what a multiplier that's going to be for you if you understand law, you want to get into law, and now you have this skill that no one in the organization does. That's a huge career multiplier, right? You have this knowledge of change and understanding of all the new possibilities. That's a wonderful thing. So I would start yesterday.
You mentioned learning a little bit about people who have gone down a similar path and being able to take and see what they have to say about how they learned something and then implement it into your life yourself. Yourself, as someone who's achieved so much at still a very young age, you're going to be a sort of aspirational figure for people like myself and many other people across the country at a young age. I wanted to ask, your journey and the journeys of many successful people always look without road bumps. They always look very smooth, very easy. He didn't have it difficult. He just went along. It was one step after another and it just went very smoothly. In reality, obviously, I'm going to guess there have probably been quite a few challenges. Have there been any in particular that stand out for you and how did you deal with them?
Yeah, the path forward of any kind of momentum based endeavor, your career progression, there are of course things that have been difficult. But I've been very fortunate that I've never really grappled with anything very hard. And I mean that. Like the hardest thing, I got to my late is before anyone very close to me in life passed away. That was probably the hardest thing I, had to go through. But I was very blessed that I didn't experience that until I got to my late 20s, right? In careers, I've done many difficult things and many things have gone wrong, but I've never really dwelled on it. I don't take too much solace. I've had moments where I've been willing to take a financial backseat in order to pursue some redirection. I think that's important. We have this assumption that you have to go from win to win to win. It's okay if you're in the wrong lane. You pursue a path. There's a real good skill that successful people have is they learn to quit. Quit is a negative word. We associate it with loss and we have this unhealthy relationship with quitting. You're a failure. The reality is great entrepreneurs, people who have successful careers, they tend to know when to quit. They build a muscle for that and they garner some intuition for when is the right time. So yeah, it goes back to full circle of my personal experiences is not one fraught with hardships. Some people have had very difficult lives. Mine hasn't been that. Doesn't mean it's been easy, but yeah, I don't really have anything to share other than your life will be difficult, you'll have losses, things will go wrong, and that's okay.
Oliver, thank you so much for your time. It's been incredible talking to you today. We do actually have a closing tradition here on the podcast where we ask if you could go back and speak to your 16-year-old self and give him one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
16-year-old self. It would be to try everything and don't allow the opinions of others to stop you doing anything that you want to do. I think if I could share that with my younger self, I think he would walk a very fulfilling path.
Oliver, thank you so much. It's been a real honour talking to you today, and I'm sure the audience are going to be able to draw so much from your journey and all the insights you had to share with them today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my man.